80% of the people who are diagnosed with cancer die, right? 100% of human beings die. So you see, that's one of the things about death, and where you come to recognize that one of the reasons it's hard for us to deal with death is because there's a conspiracy about it. You know, human beings have this unsaid agreement that that's not something we're going to talk too much about. You know, we're not going to think about it, we're not going to talk about it, we're certainly not going to feel our fear about it, right? And so this fear of dying begins to be a repository for energy, right? You keep being unwilling to be afraid of death, right? And so this fear of death, whenever it comes up, gets pushed down into the body, right? So now you're building a bomb. Now when something happens that scares you in terms of your mortality, right? Now you have this reservoir of fear energy in you, right? So this is one of the reasons that I think the Buddhists talk about death as a front-end issue, you know, not a back-end issue, it's a front-end issue. Let's deal with that first. So that evens the playing field when it comes to dealing with death, right? We're all in the exact same boat when it comes to death, you know. The only difference is some of us get a diagnosis where you get like a general date that it's going to happen, which isn't true either, because a lot of those people don't die. See, that's when you know you've handled death, where it doesn't matter. You know you're going to die, you don't know when it's going to happen, you don't know how it's going to happen, but you let go of any concern about it. You know, it's just okay. So that just goes to show what's possible. You know, that when you understand your true nature, when you understand the reality as the reality actually is, everything is possible. And so you stop listening to what people say like it's definitely true. You know, there is no definitely true about what people say. And you start living your life, the only realistic way to live your life is to be present to the moment. That's the only realistic way to live your life, is to be present to the moment. So you can enjoy life, so you can be here with what's happening in life. You know, I say be present to the moment, you know, and that could be listened to like, oh, okay, well, that's not hard, right? Oh, no, that is the most difficult thing that you could possibly accomplish in your life, is to be present to the moment. Because your conditioning has you not be present to the moment. That's what conditioning is. Conditioning is past experiences, past data, right? That's been collected in your brain and in your mind, right? And that's the life you're living. You're living your life in relationship to that data, in relationship to those thoughts and feelings, right? So you're really not available. And you see, you really can't even appreciate or understand how true it is that you're not available, because human beings live in a delusion that they are. You see what I'm saying? People live in a delusion that they are. Just like people live in a delusion that they're giving their attention all day long. You know, you're giving your attention. You're choosing to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. If you wake up and you start watching, you'll see that's almost never true. Your attention is taken. Your attention is taken. But what the personality does is it doesn't want to feel that it's helpless, right? It doesn't want to feel that it's out of control, so it lies about it and says, oh no, I'm choosing what I give my attention to. But if you wake up, if you start to look at it and see what's actually happening, you realize it's almost never the case that you're choosing to give your attention. And when you practice meditation, that's one of the things you're discovering if you are paying attention to the experience you're having when you're practicing meditation, that you're trying to maintain attention on the breath. How does that go? You know, you can't do it for very long, right? The same thing is true in life. You know, if you practice walking meditation, right? Same thing goes on in walking meditation. You're walking, and you have to keep coming back to being aware of the body walking, because you keep going back to thinking about what's going on, which means you're not there. That's the thing that you have to understand about thinking. When you're thinking, you're not there. When you're thinking, you're not in your life, you're in your head. Right? When you're thinking, you're in the world that thought creates, and the world that thought creates is a fear-based existence. Thinking is a fear-based existence. It's a survival operation, and it has to be a fear-based existence if it's a survival operation, because what's the energy that's going to motivate you to protect yourself? Fear. So if it's a survival-based operation, if the program that's playing is about survival, right? Then it needs fear. It needs you to be in a constant state of anxiety or a constant state of concern or apprehension. It needs that for the program to work. So it's burning up your energy, right? It's burning up your energy. It's causing you to be paranoid. It's a correct definition of paranoia, because paranoia means you're afraid, but what you're afraid of isn't real. That's paranoia. So everybody's paranoid, right? Because most of what people are afraid of isn't real. Never happens, right? And until you wake up and see that, you are helplessly burning up a tremendous amount of energy all day long through muscle tension, through concerned thinking. You know, when you're in the default state of thinking, what's the default state about? When your attention isn't necessary to do what you're doing in life, and you go into the default mode, right? What's the default mode all about? It's concern about you, isn't it? When you're thinking about yourself in the default mode, it's concern about you. It's concern about what's going to happen to you. Am I going to be all right? Is something threatening me? Is my environment safe? Are the people that I'm around safe, or are they going to kill me? And don't forget, to be killed in the way that I'm talking about it is to have your ego damaged. That's a death. You know, the survival of the ego, according to the conditioned experience, the survival of the ego is exactly the same as survival of the physical body. The survival of the physical body is something that we don't have a problem with, right? Because we all understand if this doesn't survive, you know, the show's over, you know, the life is over, right? But that's not true about the personality. And yet, according to the conditioned system, the personality and the body are exactly the same when it comes to the threats. So you experience, if somebody insults you, that's like a death. That's like a death to the ego, right? So when somebody insults you, you know, you go into fight or flight if somebody insults you, right? You feel it come up in you. You feel the energy come up in you, rise up in you, you know. That I either have to protect myself or I'll die from this insult, or I have to run away from this person and avoid them from now on, or attack them and invalidate them, kill them, kill their ego, kill their personality, right? And so this is a reality that we're living in, and as people go through their day and they come across other human beings, it's like two countries meeting, you know? The two countries meeting, and the exchange they have will indicate whether it's safe, you know? So there's these niceties that we exchange with one another, you know? That's basically what we're saying to one another is, I'm okay, you're okay. It's safe, you know, I'm not attacking you, don't attack me, right? And so we go through life this way, and it happens in terms of what we say to other human beings. It happens in terms of our visual experience of other human beings. You know, the brain is reading the body language of other human beings, you know? If they're walking too fast towards you, they might be coming after me. They might be coming to kill me. And then they walk past you and say, okay, just wasted all that energy, right? Just wasted all that energy, right? Yeah, so, and for some people, all you have to do is look at them too long, right? That's an attack. Just look at them too long, and they'll come over to you and say, what are you staring at, right? So what are you, and you know, the real question is, what are you protecting? Are you so fragile? Are you so intimidated by the existence of other human beings that you can't allow them to look at you too long? But that's the state that we're in. That's the state that we're in, right? If you practice meditation consistently, and if you do study these teachings consistently, you will get some kind of sign or signal that indicates to you that you're on the path. You know, it could be a synchronicity. It could be something that happens that couldn't possibly happen that way, but it did in your presence to show you that, you know, that you're on the right track. So that's one of the things, one of the kind of the signals, signs that you're succeeding in your practice, in your teachings, is that you start to experience feedback from the universe that you're on the right path. And when that happens, it's very powerful, it's very moving. You know, you can't question it, you know. Things happen that people are afraid to share with anybody else because they'll think they're lying or they're crazy. But these things are a lot more common than you would imagine. You know, see if you can get it in your bones that this waking up business is so central and so important to the fulfillment of your experience of a human life. Unless you wake up, you're living in you are identified with and being a a process, a program playing. You're identified with and being a program playing. And one of the aspects of that program is to keep you from finding out it's a program. That's built into the program, right? To keep you from finding out it's a program. That's why a lot of times here, when people ask a question, instead of asking the question, I'll say, look at where the question's coming from. That's more important than the answer to the question. Look at where the question's coming from, right? Because I'm trying to get you to see the program is using you to ask questions to keep this out here. It's using you to make this academic, you know? And when you ask that question, it's not that you're aware that you're doing that. No. When you're identified with the personality, you're being the personality doing what it's doing. You're not aware of it doing that because you're being it. And so its justifications are your justifications. Its questions are your questions. Its attempts to avoid the truth are your attempts to avoid the truth. That's why when you're practicing meditation, you know, some people struggle to stay awake, right? Because the system, the nervous system and the personality and the conditioning, right, is using whatever is available, right, to take you off the path, to get you off the path. Because if it doesn't get you off the path, right, you're going to wake up. And if you wake up, then you're going to know the truth. And if you know the truth, the personality is out of business. You know, it's got to move out of the house it's allowing you to have a room in. It's got to move out of the house it's allowing you to have a room in. And you can let it have a room in your house. That's the flip that happens when you wake up.
Personality's fear of death is fueling that is your fear.
That's right. The personality's fear of death is your fear of death, because the personality's fear of death means that it will disappear. You know, when you think about your death, if you think about your death and you think about what is it that's going to die here, what am I afraid of, right? I mean, if you really slow down and look closely at it, right? This is one of the things this woman said. She said, most people don't see because they don't look. They just think. People don't see because they don't look. They just think, and they believe their thoughts, so they don't have to look. They don't know the difference between what they see if they look and what they think. They don't know the difference. They think what they think is what they would see if they looked. It's not true. If you really look at death and you look at the question of, well, what is it that I'm afraid of happening when I die? Well, the answer to that is I'm afraid that I won't be in the world. The world will go on without me. I'll be gone. I won't be in the world. I don't know where I'll be. I don't know if I'll be, right? But that's what I'm afraid of, right? Well, that's the personality talking, right? Of course the personality is going to talk that way because the personality and the conditioned personality believes that the body is what you are, and when that dies, you're gone. And the personality is what you are, and when that dies, it's gone, right? But so when we study the truth, when we practice the truth, we're learning that's not true. That's not true, right? So if it's not true, you can afford to deal with it. You can afford to face your fear, right? Because the reason you're facing your fear is to release the fear that you had about something that's not going to happen. When you deal with your death, what you're doing is you're facing the death of the body and the death of the personality. So the fear associated with that can come up and be experienced. And when it's experienced and released, you let go of the fear of something that is not going to happen. That's the truth, right? But in the world we live in, even in the medical system that we live in, you know, when the doctor comes and gives you your diagnosis, you know, that you're only going to live a certain amount of time, right? That whole thing is happening in the agreements about how we behave, you know. So the doctor has to be careful because he knows you're afraid of death and the doctor's afraid of death, so he's avoiding understanding that he's going to die too or she's going to die too. So it's within the script. It's within the drama. It's within the play we're doing. It's within the game we're playing, right? That the doctor will come to you, oh, so it's so terrible, this person's going to die. When you start looking at it and you realize this is so ridiculous because so is the doctor. So is every human being going to die. Get over it, right? Get over it. And if you study the teachings and you do the practices, you can get over it because you're learning it is not true. Death is not true. Death is not real. even if after you get that conceptually, you continue to relate to death with fear, at least you know your fear is unwarranted. You see? At least you know your fear is unwarranted, right? And then one of the ways you can deal with it is to just not allow yourself to dwell on it. If you dwell on it, the system will start ramping up the fear again. Yeah, so if you're awake and you're dying and the people around you like are freaking out, you know, and they're really upset and everything, right? Your job is to take care of them. Because if you know the truth, right, you know what they're afraid of is happening to you is not happening. The people that I work with, whether they be clients or people that I'm guiding spiritually and whatever, I have no control over what they get or how long it takes or whether they get anything. My job is to just keep offering, you know, just keep offering. You know, Adyashanti, who was a famous teacher, have any of you guys listened to him? Yeah, very good. He comes from a Zen background, right? And his Zen teacher was a woman, right? And he used to go to her house. He went to her house and asked her if she would be his teacher, and she said yes. And he used to go to her house once a week. She used to have a satsang, you know, a spiritual meeting in her house. And she would set up chairs, like a dozen chairs for people to come. And he said the first, like, several times, you know, maybe a couple of months that he went there, it was only him and her. But it didn't matter to her. She was going to set up the chairs and be there if nobody showed up, right? Because her commitment was to make it available, right? Of course, it wasn't long once he got there and they started to it wasn't long before the room filled up, right? But that's the whole thing. You know, when you're awake and you're not suffering and other people around you are suffering, it's a natural thing for you to want to help them to relax. You know, it's a natural thing for you to want. So somebody who's awake and they're dying, if people around them are freaking out, then the person's going to talk to them and help them relax and calm down, that everything is okay. And you know, it really puts you, the person who is dying, it puts you in a powerful position, because if they're freaking out because you're dying and you're not afraid and you're helping them to relax, you could actually help them deal with their own death, you know, by the way you're being with that. That's why I say, you know, when people ask, oh, there are people that I care about, that I love, that they're being crazy and anxious and depressed, these teachings really show us a way to not have to suffer like that. I really want to help these people. What do I say to these people? And the answer is nothing. It's not a question of what you say to people, it's a question of who you're being. And if who you're being around them is free, and if who you're being around them is compassionate and kind and understanding of what they're going through, then you're offering as much as can be offered. And out of that, if they then say to you, oh, can you talk to me about what you're learning or what you're practicing? You know, if they ask you, then they've opened the door for you to make a contribution to them. But if they don't ask you, you don't chase people around and try and change them. They have to come. Human beings have to come to the place where they're ready to hear. You know, until that's the case, you just let them continue to be how they're being and do what they're doing. You know, that's what they meant. That saying meant, you know, pearls before swine. That, you know, it's like you don't talk about sophisticated, enlightened subjects to people who are deeply asleep. That's what that saying means, pearls before swine, right? Or let them who have ears hear. Let them who have ears hear, right? It means that you're wasting your time to talk to somebody that can't hear you, right? So one of the things, if you're going to be realistic about your interest in sharing this with somebody, then you're going to pay attention to whether they're available to hear it. If they're not available to hear it, just keep supporting them and dealing with where they're at, right, until the time comes when it's obvious they can hear what you're talking about. When I work with clients in my private practice, obviously I'm going to utilize these understandings as much as possible, right? Because they're the truth, right? But when I meet with a client, the first thing I have to do is just listen and watch to see, you know, where they're at about their life and whether or not they seem to be available for this conversation. If they are, if I start seeing that they are, then I might throw out a couple of things to see if they catch it, right? And if they catch it, then we go from there. But for a lot of people, it's obvious this conversation would be like a foreign language. Foreign language. They can't hear it. They're not here for it. They don't want it. What they came for is your regular, you know, traditional, you know, let me complain, support me in handling my life.
Tell me I'm right.
Tell me I'm right. Yeah, tell me I'm right. So when that's the case, you give them what they want. You give them what they came for. There's no point in trying to force them to be somebody they're not ready to be or hear something that they can't hear. The personality wants to try and figure things out and understand what's going on all the time, right? Rather than accept that what's happening has its own wisdom. And a lot of what's happening we won't understand and we can't understand. It has its own wisdom. When you understand that, when you wake up, if you remember the dream, fine. If you don't, fine. Same thing with death. It's the same thing. You accept things as they are. You accept what's happening as it is. You don't have to, everything doesn't have to have an underlying deep complex reality to it. Doesn't have to necessarily be that way. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you're going to necessarily understand it. So what? So you don't understand it. The awareness that's aware of the dream, right, is the same awareness that is aware of you during the day when you're awake, right? But during the day when you're awake, you don't think it's that awareness, you think it's you. But when you're asleep at night, that you is asleep with your eyes closed. So it can't be that you. And so if it's not that you and it's the awareness, well, what do you think is going on during the day? During the day, you just keep lying about it. That's all. If you face your fear in relationship to what the teachings tell us, which is death isn't real, which means you can afford to face your fear. If death was real, right, then your fear would be realistic. Your fear would make sense, right? But the reason you're facing your fear is because that's a tremendous amount of aversion, tremendous amount of energy being burned up all the time to avoid anything that reminds you of your death. If that can be let go, right, now you're free to be completely living in abandon, right, because you're no longer worried about how it's going to end or whether it's going to end. It'll end when it ends. See, the thing is, that's where you're left at. It'll end when it ends. In the meantime, what's the point of thinking about that? Instead of thinking about that, pay attention to what's going on. Enjoy the experience you're having now, right? So when it ends, it wasn't wasted. You didn't waste it. That's the key here. Don't waste the opportunity that your life is. Do whatever it takes for you to show up and actually be available to experience your life so that when death comes, it's appropriate to relax and let go instead of trying to hold on. It's appropriate to relax and let go. It's a life well lived. You were there, you experienced it, and now you can rest and just let go. And if you look at it the way Ramesh Balsekar talks about reality, not only are we all terminal, but you've already died. You've already died. It's like you put the needle down on the record, right, and it's playing, right, but the end of the record's already there, right? That's the way to look at it because that's realistic. That's the way it is. That's what he's talking about. It's already happened, right? So why should you worry about something that's already happened? Now, the reverse of that is the way people are living their life. They're living their life as a dead person that thinks they're alive. They're living their life as a dead person that thinks they're alive because the personality is dead. The personality is not awake. The personality doesn't have awareness. It's a program playing, right? But part of that program is you're experiencing a delusion that you're awake. Yeah, you're experiencing a delusion that you're awake. That's why people aren't looking to see what it would be like to be aware of what's actually happening instead of what I think about it, because they think what they think about it is what's really happening. And that's why you have to wake up gradually into the reality of it by discovering how helpless you are in being caught up in that dream. You're dreaming, but you don't consider the dream to be a dream. You consider the dream to be real, to be reality, right? And it's only when you begin to have more glimpses of what reality really is, that you start to realize that this is not real, this is a dream. And here's the deal. It's much more satisfying, much more enlivening, much more exciting, right? To be alive and available to life and what happens in life, even when it's uncomfortable, right? Versus just living in a thought world. There's not too much excitement there, it's just a lot of fear, right? A lot of thinking, a lot of trying to figure things out, a lot of resistance, a lot of trying to be in control, a lot of trying to stop things that are happening, right? But when you wake up and you realize you're missing the fun. You're missing the fun because life is an exciting adventure, as Helen Keller said. So why keep living in your head? Let yourself, let go, let yourself be hit by life. Let life happen and experience what it's like to be fully alive. Then when the time comes for the body to drop and the body to die, you'll feel satisfied because you were actually here. You were actually here. So it's not too hard to leave when you were actually here, right? The reason that people have such a hard time living is because when it comes time to die, the first thing that occurs to them is, wait a minute, I missed it. I missed the bus. I missed my life. And now it's over. So that's what you don't want to experience. You want to experience being alive and present, and that's what we're doing. That's what the practices are all about.